SF50, 240, and conversion on today's FedNababble.
This is FedNababble, where Kevin and Cassie make federal retirement benefits understandable for humans like you. These two don't hold back as they answer questions from the FedPilot workshops and webinars, or from questions submitted by you at fednababble.com.
Welcome, everyone. It's good to have you back to learn more about federal retirement benefits. I'm Kevin Jones.
And I'm Cassie Knight, and we're just going to jump into the questions and answer them for you, and hopefully you'll learn something today.
That would be nice. What is an SF50, Cassie?
Oh my goodness. Do you have this question often in your workshops? Let me ask you that. On what an SF50
No,
is.
I don't. And I think it's because people are afraid to ask what an SF50 is. There are right. And I think that actually happens a lot. You know, we talk about an SF50 and people just go, "Oh, of course, and an SF50, I know what that is." And they really don't have a clue. And they just go along with it. I think there's a lot of that happens. But what is an SF50?
Yeah, so an SF50 is actually a really important document that everybody should keep copies of. You're going to have more than one. Okay, this is not one of those forms like retirement application where you just submit one of them or two of them, depending on what that looks like. But essentially, you have many SF50s throughout your career as a federal employee, and they are documents that show any change in your salary, so any step increases or any other sorts of increases in your pay. If you switched from one position to another, then you have documentation on that. If you changed your FEGLI benefits, you have an SF50 for it. There is an SF50 for every move and everything that you do throughout your career. And that's why it's especially important to keep a hold of them. I think you can go on your EOPF and download your SF50s and save them electronically if you can, because this is a very important to have if there's any discrepancies in, your position, your pay, benefits, what have you. This is especially important to have for anybody, especially air traffic controllers who are, subject to Vision 100, or just in general. I think they're actually required to have their last SF50 when they submit the retirement application. But if you are a federal employee, you need to have this documentation. Because after you separate, if there's any problems with the retirement application and you have to go back and get that information, it is 10 times harder to get that document from OPM or wherever they have that. I don't even think that most of these are electronic. I'd have to look up the exact date, but I want to say it was like late 90s that everything went electronic, maybe early 2000s. And so everything previously is in a warehouse in the middle of nowhere.
Yep. And I even heard once, I don't even remember where I heard it, but their SF50s and other documentation was in a warehouse and it burned down. And so they didn't even have access to that. So they tried to get it and they said, it was in that fire. Yeah, sorry, that's too bad. So SF50s, you're right. That's another one that you want to keep track of, that everyone wants to make sure that they have a copy of every one of them. And I think one of the things that people don't know how do I say this? They don't know what should be on it. And so if something is missing, they don't recognize that it is missing. I heard once of a gentleman, for example, who got to the end of his 30 years of service and said, "Okay, I'm going to retire." And they came back and said, "Oh, I'm sorry. You don't get anything." He said,
"What?
Well, why is that?"
No
and he
way.
said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, you didn't pay into your pension at all." He said, What do you mean I didn't pay into my pension? I've been working for 30 years as a federal employee and I don't get a pension. They said, well, you should have seen it on your SF-50. You should have seen it on your pay stub. You should have seen. And he said, I didn't know what to look for. I didn't realize that it should have been on there in the first place. And
wow.
and I'm sure they had to admit that, well, it turned out that they had to admit that it was their fault, not his fault, for not taking it out all these years. But he didn't know to look for it. And I don't know what happened in the end, whether he got his a pension or not. But still, you need to know what to look for. In fact, that might be a great video to do, just, Cassie, someday, just on SF-50s and what's there, what you should look for, what kind of things are, so you don't miss anything.
I think that would be valuable information for folks. What is an SF-50, what should be on there, and, what to look for if there's any issues. We can definitely have a little teaching about that.
Yeah, good. Okay, SF-50s. Next one, annual leave carryover of 240, I understand. That's an incomplete sentence, but we'll forgive that right there. We're not going to be sentence Nazis right now. So typically, federal employees can carry over 240 hours from year to year. Sometimes it's more, depending on your position and situation, whatever.
Position, agency, there's different reasons why these limits fluctuate, but I've seen them at 320 or what have you. Like there's different limits for different types of employees or different types of agencies, but essentially the baseline is 240 hours.
Right.
Okay, so normal or typical federal employees only have 240 hours that they can carry over of annual leave from year to year. Now you can still accrue annual leave with your 240 hour max, but then you have to use whatever's extra by the end of the year. Otherwise you use it or lose it, type of thing. And so essentially you can only carry over 240 hours into the next year. So
yeah, and I think what this person, the second half of this says, what about the extra hours for 2020? So I think what this person is talking about is, let's say there is an extra week in the pay period into the next year, 2021. Let's throw that in. And what happens to that extra time, because they don't get paid the 8 hours of annual leave until, is it 8 hours of annual leave? 8 hours of annual leave per pay period. Is that right? Am I saying that right?
Annual leave varies depending on how many years of service that you have. And so newer employees earn less. More seasoned employees earn more. But I think it's a 4, 6, and 8 hour accumulation, but essentially, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that it's annual leave that varies. Either way, there can be, 100 to 200 hours that somebody earns in a given year. If you are close to retirement, I think it's 220 or something like that you earn in a year. Because obviously you're earning that 8 hours per pay period. But you can retire with 448 hours or 440 hours of annual leave and get paid out for those hours. So if you plan on retiring at the end of the year, you can accumulate all of that and not use it because you're not going to lose it. Okay, but essentially anything above 240, they want you to use throughout the year because you're not going to carry it over into the next year. But if you plan on retiring, then they'll pay you out for those extra hours.
And I think what this question here is asking is, if they retire at the end of the year, December 31st, they've rolled over 240, they build up their 208 after that, right? So they go out with 448 hours, But what about the extra hours in 2021 that they didn't get from the pay period beforehand? So let's say they get 8 hours every pay period. They don't get awarded that 8 hours until the end of the pay period, which happens to be in 2021. And so they're missing out on 8 hours of annual leave in that
Yes.
instance. Right. And so, and that's the way it is. It's better than, I hear people all the time, and this is just a misunderstanding of how it should be applied. But some people say, well, I want that 8 hours of annual leave, and so I'm going to retire in the first week of 2021, not realizing that they got the 8 hours of annual leave, but they just dumped 240 or 200 plus hours. That it's a trade-off. 200 plus hours or 8. Which one do you want?
I also want to point out that how it affects the pension as well, right? So if they retire the first week of January, then they're missing out on almost 3 weeks of their pension accrual, and they're not getting paid.
Right.
Right. So it doesn't just affect the annual leave from the carryover standpoint, but also the pension accrual on the other end. And so first employees really have to make sure that they are retiring on the last day of the month. So that way their pension begins accruing the first of the following month. Otherwise, they lose out on pay, whether it's pay from being an employee or pension accrual. There's a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on the month and the days and how all that works. But essentially, they can really, I don't think that they take into consideration the other factors here when it's, I want to make sure that I'm leaving on the end of a pay period to get this time. Well, what happens to the rest of it? What happens to the pension accrual? What happens to, whatever other things you need to think about for your case, right? And so essentially, if you're looking at maximizing your annual leave, you need to retire the end of the year. Okay, December 31st, December 30th, what have you, to make sure that you're not going to roll over and essentially lose those hours that you've accumulated the year prior.
Okay, I'm going to throw a big caveat in there, Cassie.
Sure.
So what you said is spot on, right? If you want to maximize your annual leave, then you should retire December 31st and do it that way. However, in some cases, that may push people, they get that check a couple weeks later, that may push people into the next tax bracket for the next year, which means, and now I did a simple calculation. And I took a $50,000 employee who worked 30 years, did some calculations, and found out that if they retired on December 31st, having rolled over 240 and 208 that year, build up to 448 hours, get paid 2 weeks later, they will actually be $10,000 less than if they had done it differently. So that is a huge amount. So yes, maximizing your annual leave, that is how you do it. However, that is not the only consideration we need to look at when retiring. And people get stuck on that. Oh, I want to maximize my annual leave, and don't realize the domino effect it has on everything else. And federal employees have to be so careful of that.
Yeah, these benefits really do have a ripple effect. Like if you do something to this one, then it affects all the rest of it, right? So you really have to be cautious about that, because if they have a simple retirement too, like for OPM to be able to finalize, then they're getting the interim payments, and then they're getting all that back pay. And what if the SRS is in place, right? What if they're collecting Social Security? Like all of these different factors have to be considered when you're looking at retirement and how it's going to affect the tax bracket. Like that's a whole nother conversation.
And what affects
this, you've got to talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about, who can help you out, who can help you figure out those considerations though, right?
This is complicated.
I love our advisors in our network because we know what they do. They're looking at every single aspect of your employee benefits, plus the financial side of it, to really set you up. So that way you're not, doing something that you actually think is right that might be wrong due to your situation or what have you. And so I love that our advisors really look at all of these different things and the ripple effect that they have on every single benefit, and, really a financial plan or tax planning considerations. They're taking a look at that and letting you know, hey, this is what's going to happen here if you do this. So if we do this, maybe you retire in, September or August, you get the annual leave payout and everything else, and that helps for this year. And then next year, you can next year you can set yourself up maybe in a better tax situation or what have you, if that's one of your concerns. And so definitely important to talk with somebody who knows the federal benefits and how they work, and what all of those considerations are, so they can really help you out there.
Who knew that choosing what day you should retire would be so complicated? But it is. It can make the difference in sometimes tens of thousands of dollars of when. And so, anyways, it's complicated. We'll just say that.
Yes.
We only have a few minutes left for this last one. Can you change regular TSP to Roth TSP?
Well, thank goodness this one's easy. The answer is no.
Right.
Nope.
There you go. Okay.
You cannot put your traditional TSP convert it into a Roth TSP. That's not, there are strategies to take it out of TSP and into a private Roth, but that's a whole nother conversation. Essentially, though, you cannot switch your traditional Roth and just move it over to or traditional TSP, into a Roth TSP account. It's
right. Just
work.
no. Right. Yeah. So
in
the accumulation phase, the answer's what you're trying to do. The answer is no. In the distribution phase, you still can't do it in the TSP, but there are ways to do essentially that, just not in the TSP. So it can be done outside, but it can't be done inside, no matter what, in the accumulation or distribution phase either. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah. TSP has limitations.
Yep. Yes, it does. All right. Well, if you would, we would love for you to like, subscribe, follow, and all that good stuff. Get notifications and share this with your friends and your coworkers, and make sure they understand this, because they're going to retire someday and they need to know this information.
Yes, they do. And we didn't talk about the report very much in this episode, but we do offer a report about your benefits, so you know exactly where you're starting from. And if you go to fednobabble.com, then fill out the information, then one of our advisors in our trusted network will get a hold of you within 48 hours to get the information needed for that report, and tell you exactly how much your annually payout's going to be, and all of those different things that we talked about, to really help you with your planning in your retirement process. So reach out to us and let us help you feel, encouraged and do that retirement at a place from knowledge, rather than just having to figure it out during the crisis planning part.
Yeah.
So thank you, guys.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.
To get Cassie's comprehensive report on your federal retirement benefits at no cost, no obligation, and no sales pitch, go to fednobabble.com. While you're there, submit a question for them to answer on the show.